Hello. Today we have two very interesting and important guests to discuss the events actually of this 2024 year that is almost ended. And we have Michel Makinsky, General Director of the enterprise Ageromys International. He's a consultant and associate researcher at the IPSE. It's the Institute of Applicable Geopolitics. Excuse me for bad pronunciation, but maybe you will correct me. And also we have another guest is Alnabwani Khaldoun, who is a French philosopher of Syrian origin. And he's also a political analyst and has a wealth of knowledge about the Middle Eastern region. So I'd like to start this discussion with a very general question, but we will be building on this question later on. Because this year actually was quite rich on different geopolitical events. We had Syria, we had continuation of the war in Ukraine, the elections in the United States, snap elections in France, Georgia, what happened. So a lot of different events. And in your opinion, or for you personally, what was the most important geopolitical event that has basically shaken the year of 2024? And I will start with Michel.
Thank you for your introduction. Two major events are leading our attention. First one is the election of Donald Trump. This is a genuine game changer. Second major issue leading to the Middle East change, that is the fall of Bashar al-Assad. These two events will lead our attention, and obviously, even if the current Ukraine-Russia conflict is of major importance, nevertheless, the two above-quoted events are genuine game changers for long.
I understand. And for you, Alnabwani?
Hello, thanks to have me in this discussion. I agree with your guest. Donald Trump, the election of Donald Trump is one of the most important issues in this year. And a lot of changes in the Middle East, not only the collapse of Bashar al-Assad regime, but also the end of the Hezbollah in some way. They killed the leader of Hezbollah, and what happened in Gaza, and it's one of the most important things, issues in this year. But we should speak about the origins of these things that began many years before the collapse. There is a revolution against Bashar al-Assad, and we are toward a new or a greater Middle East, as Benjamin Netanyahu said, and it's a very ancient plan. It's concretizing now, I think.
Exactly, and we will obviously continue discussing these issues. And a question to Michel, actually, how could to your boss, to be honest. But let's start with Michel. Michel, you mentioned that Donald Trump is one of the most important. The election of Donald Trump was one of the most important geopolitical events of this year. And how, in your opinion, it is already influencing the international agenda, if it is influencing, and how possibly his administration and his inauguration is scheduled for January 20th of 2025 will impact the geopolitical events in the Middle East, in Europe, elsewhere. How do you see his administration working on?
This administration has already started to work on main topics even before the official day inauguration in the 20th of January. Trump has already taken some initiatives. He has appointed unofficial envoys to engage with major Arab leaders and with Netanyahu. In particular, I note he he managed to allow Elon Musk to have unofficial discussions, but leaked, carefully leaked discussion with the Iranian diplomatic mission at the UN. He has already made some message towards Netanyahu, towards main Arab leaders, and then he's already managing to launch first initiatives. He he's not. He has probably not totally defined all options, in particular vis-à-vis the Palestinian issue. He has several cards at hand. Of note, a critical option on allowing Netanyahu to launch strikes on Iran is not definitely clear. He has amongst his advisors people who push him to launch a strike against Iran following a window of opportunity deriving to Iran weakness following Israeli strikes both in Iran and in Syria, etc., etc. Therefore, one current is pushing to launch immediately a strike on Iran, while others are advising not to hurry on this opportunity. My own guess is that a factor is very important. I mean, the Saudi factor. I think a game changer in Middle East is the growing importance of Saudi Arabia as somewhat a pole of influence, not only within the Arab world, but beyond, through the extraordinary summit of the Islamic Conference in last November, where MBS managed to lead a broader current, and in this respect, keeping in mind the very important factor of the Iran-Saudi Arabia agreement of 10 March 2023, where both states started not a normalization, but a decrease of tension. And in this year, 2024, a game changer event has arisen with the first military joint exercise, Saudi Arabia and Iran, and following that meeting, a high-ranking military Saudi delegation went to Tehran to decide on a future naval exercise. This shows that both countries, which have in the past been in a very hostile confrontation, threatening with mutual threats, they decided to decrease tension. For Saudi Arabia, this is a priority for the development of its Vision 2030 plan, which requires a huge decrease of tension in the region. And this factor may be of importance for next Trump's plan in the Middle East. He could be tempted to push Netanyahu to launch a strike to end the job onto Iran. But in the meantime, I'm sure that MBS will advise Trump, to push Netanyahu not to increase tensions in that region, because this is contrary to MBS interest, and MBS wants a decrease of tension. This is a very important factor.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. And actually, Nabwani, I would like to ask you the same question, but with a small additional one. I'd like you to talk more actually about how the election of Donald Trump was perceived in the Middle East, namely in Syria, in Israel, in Iran, in the major capitals, in Egypt, for instance. Could you please elaborate on it?
Actually, the elections of Donald Trump, it's a kind of victory also for Netanyahu and for many other leaders that they are in somehow friends of Donald Trump's, like Erdogan. But in the other hand, we will see a kind of conflict between economical conflict between Europe and USA, as it was the case in the first election of Donald Trump. It will be also a kind of tension, a great tension, a very intensive tension between USA and Iran. It will be the end of the war between Russia and Ukraine, and it will be more pressure about China. I think there are two enemies for Donald Trump in the theater, in the international scene: China and Iran. And about Middle East, yeah, we are watching now. We are in somehow we are the regression. There is a very big regression of the domination of Iran in the Middle East and on the Middle East. So the comeback of Donald Trump will change a lot of things in the Middle East, and that began before his coming, the official day, as Michel said. So Iran will it's very weak now. It will be weaker than this day, and we could see a kind of peace in the Middle East between Israel. Israel will be the most powerful power in the region, in the Middle East. That is clear for me. Because Donald Trump will help Israel to continue this project, the greater Middle East or the new Middle East. So that will be good and somehow for the population, for Syrian, Lebanese, and Arabia, Saudi Arabia, and other countries in the region. All these countries like to be a kind of peace in this region, and that will change these things in the interest of Israel, especially in the interest of Israel. The loser in this war somehow is Iran. Iran lost a lot of things, lost a lot of domination interests in Syria. Before that, in Lebanon, because she dominated the Hezbollah, and she lost the war in Gaza. So all that changed a lot of things, all the face of the Middle East, and that will actually, for me, it will a kind of a new era in Middle East. Not only we are, it's the end of the Sykes-Picot borders and the new or greater Middle East. It could be a very good thing for people there because there will be a kind of peace, development, economical development, and other things. Yeah, because the domination of Iran was very bad for the countries in this region. And that will change a lot of things.
Do you think that, I see that you're very optimistic and it is great. So do you think that the Trump administration will work on some kind of, I would say, I don't know, the Abraham Accords 2.0 or something like this? Do you see it being reactivated or upgraded somehow?
Abraham Accord, it was in 1919, I think. It was, it's a kind of a step in this project, a very, very big step in this project, and it will continue with Saudi Arabia and with other countries in the region. Yeah, but to be honest, to live in peace in Middle East, we should have the two states. Israel should admit that Palestinians should live in their state. Without this most important thing, the war will continue in somehow or another. So to have the peace in the Middle East, to change, to go back, to go to the greater Middle East, we should have two states in Israel and Palestine. Without that, the war will continue, in my mind.
I understand. And Michel, do you share the Alnabwani's opinion, or do you have something to add? Maybe you have some different point of view.
I feel the Abraham Accord is a priority for the U.S. administration, but indeed there are huge obstacles. As long as Netanyahu is in charge, he doesn't want a two-state solution. We have seen MBS raising the issue of the two-state solution. To be honest, Arab monarchs don't like Palestinians. They never like Palestinians since an historical step. Remember, when Saddam Hussein tried to invade Kuwait, he received the support from Yasser Arafat. And this capital sin was never forbidden by monarchs. So they are compelled to express support to Palestinians. But in fact, with the very exception of Qatar, due to its links with Muslim brothers, and people forget that Hamas is the Palestinian branch of Muslim brothers. With the exception of Qatar, monarchs don't like Palestine, but due to the context, they must support the two-state solutions. But Netanyahu doesn't want at any rate a two-state solution. This is why you see, instead of, I would say, a trialogue, you see a dialogue between MBS and Washington in order to build an agreement, keeping the Palestinian issues aside. And even when you see the contemplated agreement between Washington and Riyadh, there are still obstacles. And one obstacle is not the Palestinian issue between Washington and Riyadh. This is the nuclear issue. For long, MBS tried to get an agreement from Washington for transfer of nuclear technology, in particular enrichment. And MBS tried to get from Trump, who agreed with that, an agreement for not only selling nuclear plants, but transferring enrichment technology. And the Congress, even Republican, is opposed because MBS doesn't want to sign the 123 protocol, which is compulsory according to US law for avoiding proliferation. And MBS refused to sign both the 123 protocol and what we call the gold standard, which has been agreed by the United Arab Emirates, which have received the technology with all guarantees. And by contrast, you see MBS, which doesn't want to sign with the 123 protocol and the gold standard. And this raised concern within the Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, because this shows that MBS has probably a hidden military nuclear program. And I remember that Israel launched delegations and at full speed at the Congress, stated that we at Israel, we don't want a nuclear Saudi Arabia. And this nuclear issue is absent from debates focusing on the two states issue, which is critical. But don't forget the nuclear dossier, because it links to a risk of broad proliferation on the Arab Peninsula, and it is linked as well to the Iranian nuclear program. Remember, Saudi Arabia constantly state that if Iran keeps running its nuclear military program, we Saudis must build our own nuclear arsenal. And this is the context of this dispute, which seems rather exotic to external observers, but at stake there are the nuclear Iranian program is a big concern for Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia has good reasons to discuss this with Iranians, and assure that advising Iranians to keep the current level at the threshold state, because otherwise they will feel compelled to launch their own military program. And there are already symptoms of hidden military intentions in Saudi Arabia, a very big concern.
I understand. And actually, why I asked about the potential Abraham Accords agreements 2.0 is because it was quite a success in 2020 when Donald Trump initiated this kind of a process, and it was derailed or put on hold by the Hamas attack on Israel, and then Israel defending its country. I mean, just recently, actually, speaking of Israel, just recently, Israel attacked Yemeni Houthis and striking the airport in the capital, Sana'a. But we have seen already different US and British coalition trying to launch bombardments and strikes against the Houthis in Yemen, and it didn't really work out, actually. They still continue to operate in the Red Sea. They still continue to disrupt the navigation, the maritime navigation there. So how could you actually, I wouldn't even say characterize this Israeli strike? Why did they decide to strike? Was it just to show off a force that you cannot strike on Israel, so we will strike back? Or there is something behind and they're trying to maybe try to solve the situation? But yet again, we have seen that this kind of situation is the bombardments, and I guess without troops on the ground, it cannot be solved. So I will start with Alnabwani, and then Michel, we will ask your opinion.
Actually, for me, al-Houthi is not separate from Iran. It's a kind of a project to destroy Iran everywhere. Not only Iran, the country, but the branch of Iran everywhere in the Middle East, included al-Houthi militia. So they began with Hamas in Gaza, and after that, Hezbollah, Bashar al-Assad, the regime of Bashar al-Assad, and now it's the turn of al-Houthi. So it's a kind of destruction of the Iranian project, the Iranian domination in the Middle East. It's al-Houthi, and I think after that, the next step will be in Iraq, and they could strike Iran in Tehran or any other nuclear positions in Iran. So it's not separate. It's a kind of continual project to destroy the domination in Iran in this region. And for that, they have a kind of agreement. Saudi Arabia, many others, Arab Gulf countries, and it's a kind, all the world, actually, not only regional. For this, all the world would like to end the domination of Iran in the Middle East, especially in the Arabic world. And I think it's the last steps in this project. They destroyed a lot of things. Now it's almost collapsed, Iranian domination, and they don't want to see nuclear project in Iran. Neither Donald Trump and it's his administration, nor Benjamin Netanyahu. But to speak about it's the same position for both of them. They don't want to see Palestinian states in Palestine. But without that, the conflict will continue. For now, Saudi Arabia and BC and others leaders, Arab leaders, they make a kind of condition to make peace with Israel. We should see two states. It will be a kind of pressure on Donald Trump's administration and Benjamin Netanyahu, because we know through all these years, the conflict haven't stopped, because there is more. We should accept the international resolution, especially in the UN, to have two states. Without that, the people, even if there is a kind of agreement, if there is a kind of peace between countries, the populations will not live in peace. Israel till now not accepted by many Arab population. We can live with Israelis without any problem if they give a right of Palestinians to live in a sovereign state in their state, as United Nations for the resolutions of United States accorded or attested that many years ago. So without that, the Middle East will not be in peace, even there is a kind of official peace between leaders.
So just to summarize about the strikes on Yemen, so you said that it is a continuation actually of this, mostly, let's put it clear, it's a war between Israel and Iran, and it's a continuation of Israel trying to destroy the Iranian force and Iranian influence in the Middle East. And for you, the main root of the problem in the Middle East is basically the absence of the Palestinian state. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. And Michel, so actually the same question to you about Israeli strike on the Yemeni Houthi, and why, how, what is the bigger picture?
First of all, it is important not to consider Houthis are only proxies. It would be a big mistake to consider their behavior as resulting from instructions from the boss. I want to remind a statement from the former Foreign Affairs Minister Zarif some years ago. He was asked by a naive American journalist, well, what is your interest in Yemen? What is your strategy in Yemen? And Zarif answered, none. What does it mean? It means that for Iran, Yemen is far from its borders, but it was an excellent tool to exert pressures onto Saudi Arabia. And the job has been done and ended on the 14 September 2009. What happened? Iran sent cruise missiles onto Saudi refineries, and this was a game changer. From this day, Saudi Arabia understood that it was vulnerable. And from this date, MBS changed totally his strategic vision. He pushed an end to the conflict with Yemen. Well, there is a lot of job to do, but the tension between Houthis and Saudi Arabia has significantly decreased. Now Houthis are focusing their strikes on the Red Sea, on Israel. I will come back to this in a few seconds. But from this, MBS changed his strategic mind. No, why Israel is striking Houthis? Houthis have indeed their own agenda, but they and have been very surprised to hear from Houthis leaders from conversations that they are sharing Arab solidarity on the Palestinian issue. I was, to be frank, I'm not a specialist in Yemeni affairs, but I learned with some surprise that Houthis are really concerned with Palestine for ideological reasons, not perhaps religious reason, because the old Sunni and Shias arcs, etc., are totally outdated. But they have ideological reasons to act against Israel. But there is a strategic issue on Houthis' behavior, launching missiles, drones against Israel. And this has not been noted. You should have noted that the Emirates have decided to build a naval base on the Socotra Island, which is near the Yemeni coast. But that's not the core point. Emirates have brought with them Israelis.
Mhm.
And this has been seen by Houthis as both a threat and a provocation. And one cannot understand decisions by Houthis to launch strikes towards Israel without taking account of this very specific detail. Israelis are near their coast. So it's a very powerful motivation for them to launch strikes. No, Israel has been compelled to strike Houthis because unexpectedly Houthis managed to avoid detection. They launched drones, quite a few missiles, and this has been perceived by Israel and adequately perceived as a threat from abroad. Mm-hmm. And there is a strong motivation from Israel to try to kill any new front arising, even from abroad. That's clear.
I understand. Actually, I'd like us right now to try to think about because we all understand the position of the global powers in the Middle East before, let's say, October 7th last year. And in your opinion, how the priorities of the big countries have evolved since the war, since the, let's say, relaunching of the war in the Middle East? What is the current interest of the United States, of China, of Iran, let's say, even though it is not a big country, but it's a country that creates a lot of disturbance, let's say, and Russia, for example, who had quite big problems, I would say, recently in Syria. So what are the current priorities and approaches to this region? And I'll start with Alnabwani, please.
Actually, it's a kind of conflict between the unipolar that in the United States of America and Europe. But now there is the rise of Russia again. It's returned back to the scene of the international scene. The rise of the China as a very powerful economical power in the world. So it's a kind of challenge for the United States and Europe. And they would like to change the world, not unipolar, but be polar or multipolar forces in all the world. So there are many interests in many countries and regions in the world. Now in the Middle East, there are Russia, for example, it's the first time for Russia to have a kind of place on the Mediterranean. It's the first time for Russia that has have two bases in Syria, for example, military bases in Syria. And there are a conflict about many interests we know, for example, the conflict between France and Russia about many African countries, Chad, Niger, and it's the same case in somehow between the West and the East now. There is a kind of East power, China with Russia. There are many interests to dominate the world. Otherwise, for example, for the United States of America, generally they have military interventions to dominate this country or that, as the case in Iraq. For China, it's economical interests. Russia tried to make disrupt the interests of the West in many countries. Now in the Middle East, we have a very hot conflict and somehow between Russia and the West. Now, for example, for Syria, Russia has lost the war in some the Cold War in Syria for now, and Iran and that reflects in somehow this conflict between the interests of the West and Russia that would like to return back as it was USSR in the past. So yeah, we have the world is changed. Actually, Russia is very powerful now. It will win the war in Ukraine, and somehow China is very powerful, economically powerful, and that afraid USA, especially Donald Trump, the world was changed, and the Middle East in the heart of this conflict between the East and the West. I can read this generally without details, but generally I find that it's a kind of international conflict between the classical blocks, the East and the West, but not as it was USSR and United States with Europe. Now we have many other forces in the world: Russia, China, India, and Iran. It was one of the most powerful force in the region, in the Middle East. So this conflict reflects many changes in the Middle East. The collapse of Bashar al-Assad is a kind of it's reflect the result of this conflict between Russia and the United States and other forces in the region and in the international scene. Israel, one of the most of the most powerful force in the region. That it's a kind of United States make use of Israel to change many things for its interests in the Middle East. For me, this is a kind of international conflict between the two groups in general.
I understand. And Michel, few points from you maybe.
First of all, Russia has two priorities. First, it's conflict with Ukraine, but the hot file is Syria. How Russia will keep its bases, they have been surprised by the fall of Bashar al-Assad, and they are already in touch with the new regime, with these channels, and it appears they are trying to negotiate the future of the base. In my opinion, this is certainly a very tough negotiation because the new power considered rightly Russia as enemy. The new power considered that balance of power is in this side, and negotiations will be extremely tough. One may guess that Russia will be asked as a major condition not to use locally its bases, only for refueling, monitoring the region, Mediterranean, etc., but no intervention in Syria or in the neighboring area. I'm not sure that even the new power will allow Russia to keep its base. That's not for granted. And Russia has no resources for imposing these bases in Syria. This is a major defeat for Russia, a game change, because for Russia's influence in Africa, Tartus is of critical importance. And if Russia is deprived of Tartus, it is a very, very big shock. No, China. China is obviously discreet. Obviously, China has no weight on the Palestinian dossier. However, China has a big weight onto Saudi-Iranian relationship. Don't forget that Xi Jinping was the main force driving the two former competitors to decrease its tensions. But priority for China is keeping its energy supply safe. This is the top priority for China. And you see, China does not often support Iran. Both Russia and Iran supported the Emirates on the dispute on the small islands, Abu Musa, Grid, and Small Thumb. And Iranians are furious against both Russia and China because they don't support Iran on this dispute. So for Russia, Russia tries to keep its base, and this is far. It's not obvious. And China is discreet and tries to safeguard its energy supplies, its agreements and expanding agreements with main monarchies, with Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Oman, Qatar, etc. Another actor must be not to be forgotten. I mean, India. India has every month a big implication in, for example, in Emirates and in other monarchies, and because India wants through various corridors to develop its connectivity throughout the Arab Peninsula and beyond. And Biden has pushed the launch of a contemplated agreement, which is called IMEC. There is a consensus amongst both industry and economists that IMEC, if it may be implemented, will be implemented in the next 20 years. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia and all monarchs are pushing for developing connectivity through Iraq, Iran, both rail connectivity and maritime connectivity. And this is a game changer, the development of Gulf connectivity with the big mega region, Central Asia and Caucasus. And Saudi Arabia is pushing hard toward this connectivity with Pakistan, with India, and Iran is associated to this move. And Saudi Arabia, this is a field for cooperation with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia encouraged Iranian connectivity from Iraq to Iran and to Saudi Arabia and Caucasus. This move, you have competing corridors, officially competing, north, south, east, west. In fact, they are complementary. They will match each other. And both Pakistan, India, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and other monarchs know this. So the well-advertised IMEC project is something which may never be implemented, or if it is implemented, it will be implemented as a complementary corridor. Final word, a very important move from Turkey, which decided to launch a corridor from Turkey to Iraq, which is financed by both Qatar and Emirates. And this is progressing very fast. Every month, they are coordinating meetings headed by an American consultant in order to make fast progress. Experts think that the Turkish-Iraqi corridor will be implemented within next 5 years. The IMEC corridor, if it is implemented, may be implemented in terms of 15, 20 years. So Chinese, Russians, Saudi Arabians, monarchs, Iraqi, Iranian are in the meantime working hard because they are not starting from scratch. That's the difference. And IMEC is threatened by the current trouble in the Arab Peninsula and with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And there are huge geopolitical uncertainties. And when I read through IMEC literature that there is a big project for a giant pipeline with hydrogen, I'm sometimes asking myself, I am dreaming a pipeline with hydrogen in a zone like Saudi Arabia, which is, as everyone knows, as peaceful as Liechtenstein and Switzerland, where you have guys everywhere capable to launch a missile. That's totally crazy.
And the United States, because you have talked about the Russians, the Chinese, etc., and Indians, and what is the U.S. Current interest in the region?
Yeah, Trump wants, first of all, to end his assessment of its capabilities, and in particular, this relies upon Netanyahu's future and what Netanyahu will do. Top priority is probably for Trump to make his mind and decisions on the option, the nuclear option against Iran. This will be on top of the list, and then he will try to push for a bilateral agreement between Saudis and himself. That's obvious, because he knows that a trilateral agreement with Israel will take time due to Israeli uncertainties.
Thank you. And I guess because it's almost an hour we are talking right now, and you have pointed out, both of you actually, the two main geopolitical events of this year was the election of Donald Trump in the United States and the fall of Bashar al-Assad regime in Syria. And actually, I guess for our last question, I would like to talk Syria. And I'm particularly interested in having your opinion about why did Bashar al-Assad regime fall so quick, because it took like, I don't know, maybe a week, maybe 10 days. We were observing those progression of the HTS forces so quickly, and the Damascus basically fell as well. We were having reports at night, and in the morning already it was announced that the city has fallen. And another part of the question, I'd like to understand or to have your opinion about what could be the possible way forward for Syria, because right now the different information we are having is that some are very positive, saying, okay, it's a new time for Syria, etc. And then others are much more cautious about it, saying, for example, that Ahmed Hussein al-Shara was a part of the Islamic State, and there are Christians, for example, in Syria, and what could be their fate, and maybe there will be another civil war in Syria. So please, and I will start with you, Alnabwani, please. So the first part of the question is, why did Bashar fall so quick, and what is the way forward for Syria? What can we expect from the HTS government?
Actually, first of all, because the army was very weak, many years fight with the rebels, and it was very weak. There is sanctions from the United States, Europe, and other countries on Bashar al-Assad regime. So it was in a very bad situation. There is a kind of economical war against Bashar al-Assad. No one actually would like to continue the war. Everybody, even his supports from Alawite and others, minorities or communities in Syria, no one would like to continue. And because of that, it was collapsed fast, very fast, actually. Just 1 week from Idlib to Damascus, and because of that, yeah, we and all the people in Syria was very poor, especially in the last 5 years. There is no things to eat. Actually, it was very misery situation in Syria. So because of all of that, the regime was collapsed. And besides that, neither Iran nor Russia supported Bashar al-Assad as before. In 2019, Russia, for example, helped Bashar al-Assad strongly with many arms. But because of the war in Ukraine, they withdrew a lot of their weapons, planes, and so because of that, they couldn't help him. Hezbollah, that supported Bashar al-Assad, has a very bloody war south of Lebanon. So because of that, he couldn't help Bashar al-Assad. Without all these supports, Bashar al-Assad found himself alone somehow.
It was a perfect timing. It was a perfect timing.
Yeah, exactly. It was clarified for me. It was so because of that, he fortunately leaves Syria, but leaves Syria in a very bad situation, a very actually sad situation even. So we because of that, and what's the second half
it's
of
the way
question?
it's the way forward for Syria, because there are a lot of different opinions about. Some are more cautious, saying that the arrival of HTS and especially Ahmed Hussein al-Shara, who was part of the Islamic State, actually may introduce some kind of an Islamic caliphate in Syria, and then maybe the fate of Christians in Syria would be endangered, and maybe another civil war will be in Syria. Other people say, on the contrary, that everything is rosy, and it's a new chapter in Syria's history. So how do you assess it? What is your opinion?
That's not my case, actually. It's not. I'm very happy. I'm very glad, because this regime, with a very horrible regime, is gone. But in the same time, I'm not waiting for fundamentalists to take the place of Bashar al-Assad. I'd like to have Syria a civil state without fundamentalists, for all the minorities, for all the communities, for every Syrian. Because of that, I'm afraid for now, but I hope it will not be for a long time. It's a kind of transitional government. But for now, actually, we should work to prevent this new power to stay a long time in Syria. Otherwise, we just change the dictator, the name of the dictator, and the dictatorship will stay in Syria. It's not a good thing. So we should work on this as Syrian, as intellectuals and politicals. All Syrian composants will work to change this situation and to go to a civil state that could accept every kind of diversity of Syria in this new country.
Because there are also Alawites that, from what I understood, that the Alawites are not really happy as well, that Bashar fell and that the HGC came to power currently.
Especially Alawite, yeah, because he make use for Alawites to support him because he is Alawite, to support him against all Syrians. So they are involved with, unfortunately, with many crimes, and they should defend themselves. And because of that, we have a kind of conflict crash here and there. For example, yesterday there is, and yeah. But we should find another solution, a kind of citizenship state that based on the citizenship, exactly, not only the minorities, the communities. No, Syria for every Syrian. In this kind of state, we can live together unless we will kill each other one.
And just a really short question again to you, Alnabwani, but what can the Western countries do to facilitate actually the, let's say, democratic transition in Syria, in your opinion? What France can do, what the United States can do, what others can do?
Actually, for example, Ahmed Shara should invite all the Syrians to discuss the future of Syria. Until now, he didn't do that. He hadn't do that. He doesn't tell Syrian what he do for now. And there are many other foreign countries that involved in Syria, especially Turkey, for example, especially maybe Qatar and others. So they are working on change Syria by themselves. But what about Syria? It's our country. We should work on. So without that, Syria will stay not for Syria. It will be a country dominated by foreign countries. It was Iran, now it's Turkey, and it could be other countries. So we should discuss the future of Syria. All Syrians should participate
so
to create the new Syria.
So you're quite cautious as well, from what I understood, about the future. You're quite cautious. You're not very optimistic right now. You're cautious.
I'm not very optimistic exactly because actually I'm afraid for now they send a very bad signs somehow, but it could be changed. Actually, we are in front of a kind of Egyptian scenario. If you remember, it was the brotherhoods that
yes, Muslim Brotherhood.
The army that, but we haven't army in Syria. Fortunately, I mean, the army will not return back to the power in Syria. But Syrians should change their government. And it's a chance, it's a kind of opportunity for now for Syria to work. The regime, the very powerful regime of al-Assad is collapsed altogether. And we have now the chance to change things before this power became dictator, very hard dictator once again.
I understand. And so, Michel, and it is your time to voice your opinion.
Shortly to the three questions. First one, I have explained why the fall was so sudden in my paper, which had been issued in Les Clés de Moyen-Orient on Assad's fall. In a nutshell, first factor, the Syrian army was exhausted in all sense of term. Soldiers are not paid or very badly paid. They are tired. The management is catastrophic, corrupt, and so on. They have no morale at all, and they have lost hope, and they were definitely exhausted. Another factor, we forget that there is no genuine Syrian army. This army was made for fighting domestic opposition, repression. It has no experience of genuine war. So they are perfect for running in a city, killing civilians, etc. So they are exhausted, and second, no real professional experience. And the Iranian, Hezbollah, and Russian advisor, we very often see that they have a very bad opinion of Syrian capabilities. And we have plenty of examples where Syrians are furious to be told that you are not professional, you are not, fortunately, we are here, you're allies because you are not professional. So this is not definitely a professional army, an enemy which is exhausted. This perfectly explains why it was so fast. But I have been surprised, to be honest, by the fact that it was not really foreseen. And it was in a matter of days, and both Iranians and Russians were perfectly aware of the state of that so-called army, and definitely they were surprised. Only a few days before, during the Doha meeting, Turks told to everybody, so the party has ended, and the Iranian delegation jumped back to Tehran to take emergency decisions, and everybody was made aware only a few days before the fall. So probably there was a kind of dream. So Bashar has made some diplomatic advance toward the Arabs and Turkey, but we see that both, in particular, Erdogan was furious with Assad's refusal to make any concessions. And this explains why Erdogan considered that we can't do anything with Bashar, so we must encourage his fall. And this raises an unanswered question. Everybody agrees that Turkey is supporting the rebels.
Yes.
And to be precise, probably the National Syrian Army, not the others, or different. But we don't know precisely the nature and the extent of Syrian support, of Turkish support. And I have noted, and this will introduce my answer to the second question, we have noted a statement by Turkish officials supporting the victory, but stating immediately, we need in Syria an inclusive government. This is interesting because this shows that even in Turkey, there are some doubts on the Shara's intentions. I'm belonging to the cautious club. Shara is a very astute tactician. He knows that for some months he will need to keep a very inclusive face, a very face of a man of dialogue. His behavior with regard to Israel strikes is telling. He stated, well, I'm happy they are acting as enemies, but I cannot afford launching a new front. This means that he's extremely hostile toward Israel, but as a clever tactician, he knows that the balance of power is not in his favor. So for the time being, no reaction. But this does not make that in the future. If he is capable to consolidate his power, he probably be less sympathetic. No, I'm not optimistic for the future because we will have a testing period until the next elections. the elections will be a test. What will be the openness of the new power? Will they allow minorities to have to share power? The elections will give at least a part of the answer. I'm not so optimistic because I think one of the first steps was first to go to the Umayyad mosque and said, this is the Islamic nation victory, Islamic. But, he has appointed a member of his faction as a caretaker prime minister. This was a surprise, by the way. And currently, he is smiling to Christians, to other Sunnis, with the exception of Alawites, where there are currently some fights near Tartus, I've seen, and near the Lebanese border. But I think that currently he is smiling to everybody, but another sign, there are already incidents with women. Not many, but there are. So what can other powers must do? They have cleverly understood that first we need to talk. We need to talk and to appoint delegates in order at least to know what is happening. And then to start discussions, start to make some conditions to relations. We will fund the reconstruction provided that you are inclusive. This is the only tactic possible for every power, both regional and global. We will help you to build a new state, to rebuild Syria, but you must be inclusive. And this will be a test for the new power. But I'm not so optimistic, keeping in mind what is happening to Kurds, because while there are some limited battles against the remains of the Syrian army, there are battles, this time with Turkish support, against Kurds. And I feel the Kurd problem is totally intact, and it's an explosive problem.
I understand. That's quite a good resume, I guess, for our discussion. And then Syria, for me, honestly, it was the biggest surprise. I remember at 4 a.m. I was actually following. I was working that night, and I was following those developments unfolding, and the fall of Damascus. And it's something that has changed a lot, I guess, in the Middle East. Anyways,
and from Lebanon, sorry, two sentences on Lebanon. Perhaps the only good news is that the withdrawal of Hezbollah from Syria, a very weakened Hezbollah, would perhaps pave the way for a political solution in Lebanon. And a very recent statement from Naim Qassem, the Hezbollah head, lets us to understand that he is working on the political future for Hezbollah and perhaps reducing ambitions. And he stated that he will comply with the ceasefire agreement, and he stated that he's intended to keep his troops out of the critical zone.
Alnabwani, maybe if you want to add something, it would be the right time. Otherwise, do you have to add something?
Actually, just I would like to be optimistic. I would like to see new Syria for all Syria. That Syria, because for it we fight it many years. I would like to see. Thank you for having me for this discussion that would help us to see better what we can to do in the future.
Yes, thank you very much, Michel, Alnabwani. It was an amazing discussion. I understand that we don't have a lot of time, and it was already very, let's say, full of different points of view. Maybe not always the same, but that's the discussion. That's what's important when the opinions are not the same, because otherwise there's nothing to discuss. Thank you very much, and let's hope that the next year will be much more beautiful, optimistic, and prosperous for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.